So guys, today I wanted to talk about what I mentioned I was going to be doing in my last video, and that is talking about why in a survival situation I carry a 20 gauge as opposed to a 12 gauge shotgun. Now I do want to keep in mind that I say survival situation specifically because for hunting I actually use a 12 gauge. When, like I said, I'm going specifically hunting for game animals, I do prefer a 12 gauge. But for survival, I want to talk about why I choose a 20 gauge and not a 12 gauge. In a nutshell, my choice is pretty much figured off of the old quintessential saying of the item you have is the item you use in a survival situation. And when looking for a shotgun for survival, I really had to be honest with myself and realize that if I did choose a 12 gauge single shot, while I could write online and in YouTube comments about how much I carried my 12 gauge single shot and how it was the best thing, it can take out anything I need it to. In all reality, if I were to ever really come face to face with the people that I talked about or that I talked to via social media, I would probably not likely have that shotgun. So it was very important for me, like I said, to be honest with myself, and even though the 20 gauge was not as powerful as the 12 gauge, it was going to be the thing that I knew I would have in my backpack. I knew I would have it in the survival situation. It was something that undoubtedly I knew I could have and would have. But with that kind of basis, I want to talk about why the 20 gauge would be the thing that I knew I would have on me. And pretty much I just narrowed it down to one thing, and that was that overall the 20 gauge is in all ways smaller, and the ammo is also in all ways smaller. So for that, it's not only smaller but lighter, and so for that kind of reasoning, I knew that I would be able to have the 20 gauge, being that it is smaller and lighter, and so is its ammo. I knew it would be more economical for me to carry. And sometimes it's in a truck, and at that point it doesn't really matter, but I also carry it when backpacking. And with backpacking, especially when I know I'm not really going to be hunting, I don't necessarily want a hunting gun on me. I just want something that's for survival. And so I didn't want a large, bulky 12 gauge and also those large, bulky 12 gauge rounds. Though I do realize the 12 gauge is more capable, once again with those shotgun shells, I also know that I didn't really want to have all that weight. Once again, I wanted to put an emphasis on the fact that this is a survival thing, or a survival gun, because I'm not too likely to actually be using it. And the other thing I wanted to address was ammo. Once again, like I said, ammo in pretty much all ways for the 12 gauge is going to be larger. Not necessarily in length, because I can understand you can get 3-inch magnums for both a 12 gauge and a 20 gauge. So the size of it isn't too much longer, but in width, or diameter rather, it is larger. And that really affects, especially, hopefully you guys saw my survival kit for the shotgun, that would really affect that diameter of being able to put shotgun shells into the buttstock. And I'd probably actually only be able to put 2 12 gauges in a similarly sized buttstock as opposed to the 4 that I can fit in this one. Once again, that's because the 20 gauge is smaller in diameter, so it's easier to fit. Also, I will say, generally, another reason why I like the 20 gauge is for the fact that I could carry more shotgun shells, and why I like that is generally, unless you're extremely blessed when it does come to hunting in survival situations, I'm also not as likely to find a large flock of grouse, where if you had 2 12 gauges, or using one of the 12 gauges, you would be more likely to take down a larger flock of, let's say, grouse. But generally, when I hunt grouse, I only find around 5 of them per flock. So unless you're extremely lucky and you can find a lot of them, the 20 gauge makes more sense to have because you can carry more shells, and while those shells can't engage as large a flock, you're generally not going to find as large a flock to engage. So I like that ability. Ultimately, I just wanted to kind of come back to that point of, especially when you guys are choosing your survival weapons or really any bushcrafting tool, do try and be very honest with yourself and realize what you can and cannot carry and what you will likely carry and what you likely won't carry. Because that's a big thing I see, especially a lot on social media, where people run around acting like they carry single shot 50 cal snipers, and it's like, you probably don't. Even though you may have one, you're probably not going to ever carry that because it just makes no sense for a gun you're likely never going to use. So, try and be very honest with your survival weapons. I know people like Dave Canterbury, I talked to him quite a bit about the 20 gauge versus 12 gauge, and he always recommended I went with 12 gauge. But once again, honestly looking at myself and what I'm going to be honestly carrying, I just could never really justify a single shot 12 gauge. So that's why I always went with the 20s. So that is ultimately why I ended up choosing the 20. And luckily nowadays, the 20 has become pretty much, as far as versatility goes, pretty much equalized to the 12 gauge in the fact that Short Lane Arms has now done muzzle loading kits, or the muzzle loading shells. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with those, but if you guys know anything about Dave Canterbury, you'll probably know what the muzzle-loading black powder shotgun shells are, but they now make them for the 20 gauge. So as far as versatility goes, if you wanted more versatility in your survival gun, you could definitely get it with a 20 gauge. But like I was saying, it really does go all back to what you're realistically going to carry, even if that ends up coming down to something like an AR-7 by Henry or a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 by Kel-Tec. Those are also fantastic options, and people may scoff at them and be like, oh, that's not a 12 gauge, you can't take down a huge bear with that, but it really doesn't matter, because in the end, I find actually meeting a lot of these people that preach about carrying 12 gauges in their backpacks, they just don't actually have them in real life. And I would much rather take my 20 gauge and actually have it on me, as opposed to talking about having a 12 gauge and not actually having it when I really need it. So anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed that short explanation of why I carry the 20 gauge single shot shotgun as opposed to 12. Once again, I do know there are quite a few people out there in the community that really do carry the single shot 12 gauge, and if you can get that system to work for you, I would completely recommend it. The 12 gauge is in most circumstances better, but for me, in my personal circumstances, it just doesn't work as well. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. Don't forget to share what you guys carry as a survival tool, and hopefully you guys have learned from that, and hopefully that helps you in purchasing your survival tool if you haven't. Like I said, that is the most important key, is actually having it on you at all times, or when you think you'll need it the most. And don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe. Tell me what you guys carry for your survival tools, especially if you do carry a 12 gauge. Do also be honest, how much, if you do carry the 12 gauge for survival, how much do you honestly carry it, I would like to know that and hear that feedback. Anyways, guys, that's all I have, and I'm out.